On May 21, China's cybersecurity agency made an announcement that sent shockwaves throughout the industry. Operators of critical infrastructure in China should stop purchasing products from Micron. However, all protagonists of this incident are not surprised by this outcome, as it had been brewing for a while. In fact, as early as February of this year, Micron, the world's largest storage semiconductor company, already knew that it was going to be sanctioned by China. In reality, they should have anticipated this day when they lobbied the US government for sanctions against Fujian Jinhua in 2018. Last autumn, Micron withdrew its research and development institutions in China, indicating that they were prepared for this. In my opinion, if we understand this announcement as China's key departments excluding Micron products from procurement, it is clearly incorrect. In fact, this is a comprehensive ban, and any Chinese user, regardless of whether they are involved in government procurement or not, will try to avoid Micron products as much as possible. The following day, May 22, was undoubtedly a long day. Micron responded by stating, "We have received a notification from the Cyberspace Administration of China regarding the review of our products sold in China. We are evaluating the conclusions and considering our next steps. We hope to continue communicating with relevant Chinese authorities." This statement may sound routine and bland, but it doesn't indicate a stable emotional state on their part because they have already realized that they have lost the Chinese market. Despite Micron's significant efforts to reduce its market share in China, 11% of its revenue still comes from China. Including indirect procurement, third-party purchases but the final products entering China, at least 13% of their business is gone. On the same day, the U.S. Department of Commerce responded by saying, China's restrictions on Micron have no factual basis, and the U.S. firmly opposes it. Also on May 22, Wang Wentao, the Chinese Minister of Commerce, presided over a symposium in Shanghai to listen to the operating conditions of U.S.-funded enterprises in China and their suggestions for continuously optimizing the business environment in China. Representatives from the American Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai, as well as representatives from Johnson & Johnson, 3M, Dow, Merck, Honeywell, and other U.S.-funded enterprises, attended the symposium. Afterwards, Wang Wentao went to Detroit to attend the APEC Trade Ministers Meeting. This is also a familiar plot. First, arrange a meeting with senior government officials, then introduce a sanction measure before the meeting, while also stabilizing the emotions of other enterprises. It's like creating a bargaining chip first and then using that chip to negotiate. This tactic has been frequently used against China since the Trump era, and now it seems to have reversed. So, why did the Chinese government target Micron? Who's next? China has endured humiliation and carried heavy burdens for so long, why did it suddenly dare to sanction Micron? Isn't it afraid of retaliation from the US? Okay, that and more is exactly what we are going to talk about today. Let's get started. For a long time, the US has been playing the chip card against China. China's bargaining chip is its market demand, but it has been used very cautiously. Why Micron this time? In addition to the security risks associated with its products, it is the only semiconductor company in the US that has been actively lobbying the Office of the US Trade Representative and the Department of Commerce on China-related matters. China-related content accounts for 67% of its 170 lobbying efforts in the past 5 years. When it comes to chip sanctions against China, Micron has been the most active player, without a doubt. In 2018, Micron's revenue from its operations in China accounted for 58% of its global revenue. This is quite puzzling. Why would they offend their largest customer? In fact, Micron's insight into the memory and storage market surpasses that of most media outlets. As early as 2017, they discovered that China's storage technology capabilities were rapidly catching up. Perhaps Micron had a mathematical model that could predict how long it would take for Chinese enterprises to squeeze Micron out of the Chinese market, and even deeply impact its global business if no intervention was made. It's worth mentioning that Huawei, at one point, accounted for 13% of Micron's revenue, making it their largest single customer. However, Micron spared no effort in attacking Huawei as well. A static perspective alone cannot explain this. Only by foreseeing the rise of domestically produced storage chips in China and Huawei's inevitable shift to domestic supply sources can we understand Micron's attitude towards Huawei. In 2018, Huawei had already been banned from entering the US market. In fact, Huawei had been preparing for this day since as early as 2013. In fact, the decision to ban Micron was a carefully considered move. The measures China has taken against Micron are not fines or restrictive measures such as quotas, but rather a direct ban, although the wording may not explicitly state it, leaving no room for negotiation. There are three considerations to be taken into account. The first consideration is whether there will be alternatives after Micron is expelled. Although Chinese companies currently only have a global market share of 5%, just 5 years ago, it was almost zero. Going from 0% to 5% is not easy, but going from 5% to 20% or 40% may only require a catalyst. Production technology is no longer a problem, and cost advantages should come from the interaction between demand and production capacity. Furthermore, after Micron's expulsion, the other two giants, Samsung and SK Hynix, may take over its market share. However, the United States has anticipated this. Prior to South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol's visit to the United States at the end of April, the United States warned South Korean companies, stating, if Micron is sanctioned, South Korean companies cannot fill the gap left by Micron's exit from the Chinese market. Although the United States has been accustomed to giving direct orders to the Japanese and South Korean governments, it is still remarkable that they are doing the same for third country trade with companies. Similar requirements have been made by the United States to Dutch company ASML, but there are American companies among ASML's upstream suppliers. The storage market is different, as its supply chain is relatively short, and South Korean companies don't actually need cooperation from American companies. This also reflects the United States' insufficient capacity to meet the enormous demand for blocking China. The second consideration is retaliation from the United States. In fact, from Trump to Biden, the United States has already played all its easy cards in the chip sector. The reason why companies like Qualcomm and Nvidia can still supply to China, with restrictions on advanced chips, is not out of goodwill, but because these two computing chip companies rely on China more than Micron does. The third consideration is the timing. Micron's profits last year reached $8.687 billion, but its fourth quarter earnings dropped by 23%, indicating a declining trend. In the first quarter of this year, Micron experienced historic losses, and it is projected to further expand to $2.312 billion in the second quarter. While this can be attributed to the cyclical nature of the industry, the impact of US-China relations has exacerbated the volatility. Originally, Micron expected storage chip prices to hit bottom and inventory to decrease by the end of the second quarter, with optimism for recovery in the second half of the year. However, the 10% employee layoffs this year are highly likely to occur. At this critical moment, China delivers a direct blow, casting uncertainty over the recovery in the second half of the year. The Japanese media also believes that this timing and event are not a coincidence. Hitting Micron and killing 1 to warn 100 are not the primary objectives. What's important is that China has finally played its chip card against the United States. For the United States, China is a formidable opponent. When in a weak position, China knows how to exercise restraint and never resorts to impotent rage. After holding back for 4 to 5 years, it has launched its first substantial counterattack. This signifies a significant change in China's chip policy and strategy. Moreover, China never acts in isolation. Following this event, a series of policy combinations will follow in quick succession. Unlike its treatment of Micron, China imposes hefty fines and regulates the behavior of Qualcomm. It adopts a cold approach towards Nvidia, while welcoming Apple with enthusiasm. These attitudes and strategies are not arbitrary. For the Chinese automotive industry, the most important suppliers of automotive chips are not American companies but European ones like Infineon and Bosch. In my understanding, they have never faced any punishment in China due to monopoly or political involvement. From a long-term perspective, once the production logic of the chip industry is sorted out, neither Qualcomm nor Nvidia can create the same technological barriers as they do today, although they are likely to remain at the forefront. ASML's recent vacillation is already a result of the dilemma between market demand and US sanctions. It can be predicted that the next US company China will target is Qualcomm, not AMD or Broadcom. China's dissatisfaction with Qualcomm has reached an undisguised level. However, when it comes to intelligent cockpits and chips that support both artificial intelligence and connectivity, domestic alternatives for Qualcomm's products cannot be found. Therefore, the timing is not right for this matter. Furthermore, I have some reflections on the ban on Micron. First, the timing of this countermeasure and the selection of the targeted company are highly targeted. Firstly, the storage sector is currently facing severe overcapacity. Even though Micron's market share in China accounts for only about 10% of its total sales, if it is sanctioned during a severe downturn, it will undoubtedly worsen its situation and maximize the impact. Secondly, Micron's products have good substitutability. In the global market, Micron ranks among the top 3 in DRAM and the top 5 in NAND. Micron is facing strong competition from companies like Samsung and SK in the Chinese market. Moreover, Micron has a weak presence in specific fields in the Chinese market. Therefore, China's countermeasures in this field will cause relatively minor harm to its domestic enterprises. Second, in the current wave of deglobalization, other global markets are becoming increasingly stringent towards international companies, while China can be considered the best international market. China is the biggest beneficiary of globalization and has the greatest motivation to uphold it. On the other hand, when looking at other international markets, not to mention emerging economies like India with immature laws and regulations, even the United States and Europe are becoming stricter towards international companies. Many countries are quick to launch security investigations and impose massive fines on international companies, and countries like India even directly freeze the profits of foreign enterprises. From all aspects, China has already become the most friendly major country to foreign enterprises. Third, with the recovery of the Chinese market, European companies are increasing their investments in China. The Chinese government is also attaching greater importance to Europe, and there are frequent high-level visits by government officials. Correspondingly, as European companies deeply cultivate the Chinese market, it in turn promotes friendly relations between their respective governments and China. This positive interaction reduces many unwarranted troubles caused by political factors. Even for American companies, as long as they treat Chinese companies with sincerity, create opportunities, and actively cooperate with Chinese companies, they will still be warmly welcomed in the Chinese market. In summary, the Chinese government's countermeasures against Micron are a targeted action with reason and restraint. The only difficult situation now lies with South Korean companies. After China initiated an investigation against Micron, the United States warned South Korean companies not to take advantage of the situation to fill the void. How to develop amidst the squeeze between China and the United States has become a mandatory course for international companies. Well, thanks for your watching, and please be free to put your comments below, and share your insightful ideas. I am Tech Teller, the person to tell you the opinions that worth spreading every day. See you.